Welcome into Locked On Phillies. The Phils have a disheartening series against the New York Mets, but the schedule, it gets significantly easier from here. The downside and the upside on today's Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm Connor Thomas, your host. Been talking Phillies baseball for years over on 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio. And I want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. It was not a fun weekend for your Philadelphia Phillies. A big home series against the New York Mets. And the Phillies came up small in all games except for one of them, is what I was trying to say. The Phillies just, they don't stand up to the level of competition that the Mets bring, which is funny considering that the Phillies have handled good teams relatively well this year. But they just don't do it against the Mets. I don't know what to tell you guys. I don't know what to say about this. This is just the Mets own them right now. They lose an Aaron Nola start on Friday. They lose a Zach Wheeler start on Saturday. They only scored 2 runs in each of those games. So they lose by 5 runs and 6 runs respectively there. They lose 10-9 in a heartbreaker yesterday with a blown lead and then another blown lead. And then, of course, the game they win is the Bailey Falter spot start in the second game of the doubleheader where he is just absolutely dominant and nearly shuts out the New York Mets, and the Phillies win that one 4-1. It's a weird series. Nola lost, Wheeler lost, Gibson lost. Now, Gibson didn't actually get the loss. It was given to David Robertson because the Phillies did make a bit of a comeback attempt in the 9th inning and the 8th inning as well. But Kyle Gibson was not good in that start. And then Bailey Falter was absolutely incredible. Not a good game. The Phillies offense, quiet in the first 2 games. A little quiet in the third game, which was the second of the doubleheader, which Bailey Falter started. Now, they ended up scoring 4 runs, but it was a bit of a grind to get to those 4 runs. And then they explode on Sunday, but they lose anyway because of the bullpen and the defense. And frankly, Kyle Gibson starting pitching too lets them down. It wasn't great. Here's what I'm going to say. And here's why breaking down this Mets series, I'm not even going to do it because of the thought process behind what's going on with the Philadelphia Phillies right now. They just have one team they can't beat. Let's remind ourselves, folks. They have the season series. They've won these season series over these teams. The Los Angeles Dodgers, the San Diego Padres, the St. Louis Cardinals, and the Milwaukee Brewers. And I believe, if I remember correctly, the Philadelphia Phillies are 1 game up in the season series with the Atlanta Braves. So, yeah, all the other top teams in the National League, every other team in the playoffs in the National League, the Phillies have won more games against than they have lost, besides the New York Mets. And listen, that means the Philadelphia Phillies are still a very good baseball team. For some reason, they just see the New York Mets this year, and they don't know how to beat them. It's good news, though, because this is progress for the Philadelphia Phillies, right? Last year, who was the team the Philadelphia Phillies couldn't beat? Heck, not last year. The last 3 to 4 years. The Philadelphia Phillies couldn't figure out a way to beat the Miami Marlins, who were flirting with 500 every year. This Mets team is, 35 games over 500 now? They're unbelievable. They're one of the top 3 teams in baseball. And you can make an argument that they're the best team in baseball. And still, the Phillies, they're struggling with them. But you just kind of have to accept at this point that the Mets rather have the Phillies number. We hope one thing, right? Because this is the last game in the regular season. That was the last game between the Philadelphia Phillies and the New York Mets in the regular season. It could be the last game that the Philadelphia Phillies play against this New York Mets team this season, including postseason, because of how everything matches up. If the Mets are the 2 seed, it would be kind of hard for the Phillies to see them unless they got that top wild card spot. So this could be a blessing that the New York Mets are the only team that the Phillies can't beat because of how talented the Mets are. You're going to line up against a team that's not the Mets in the wild card round if the Phillies are indeed a wild card team and do make it in the playoffs, which I still think that they do and are. And maybe someone knocks out the Mets. Maybe the Mets run into the Braves somehow and they get eliminated. The Braves have been better than any other NL East team against the Mets so far this year. They're the only NL East team to win a series against the New York Mets. But you don't have to worry about the Mets anymore. Was it a disheartening series? Yes. In a vacuum, was the Phillies' performance concerning? Lack of defense, lack of starting pitching. Yeah, these things are all not good. We'll talk coming up in the next segment as we preview the upcoming series with the Cincinnati Reds about the bullpen and the issues there because, we had some bullpen injury issues over the weekend with Corey Knebel going on the injured list, ending his season with a shoulder tear. Seranthony Dominguez going on the injured list in a shorter stint, as for now, it's a shorter stint with triceps soreness. So the Phillies lose 2 guys in the pen, at least for the time being. Hopefully Seranthony will be back when Knebel's season is over. There are concerns. But the Phillies are still a playoff team, and the Mets are not the standard that you want to hold the Phillies up to. The Mets are a team with $1 billion owner who have gone all in and done everything they can to build a World Series winning team this year. The Philadelphia Phillies have not gone all in. They've gone like half in. And I keep calling it a proof of concept here. They haven't made the playoffs in a decade. Just make the playoffs this year. Get in. Maybe win a playoff series. And we're going to absolutely root them on, even though the goal is for me right now, just make the playoffs. Once they're in, win the whole darn thing. But for the time being, make it in, end the playoff drought, take care of business, and then retool next year because your core is coming back. So this one series against the Mets in late August is not going to make or break the Philadelphia Phillies season, and they have a lot of opportunity coming up. So now that that's the Mets series, and I keep saying, well, don't worry about them taking on the Mets. Don't worry about this. They've handled other teams. Listen to the schedule going forward, and this will tell you exactly why you don't have to worry about the New York Mets because the Phillies only play one more team of that caliber. Now, they play them in 2 series. Actually, we'll call it 2 more teams of that caliber with Houston down there finally. But the Phillies play 4 games against the Reds that starts tonight. They play 3 games against the Pirates. Should sweep the Pirates. You should sweep the Reds. Now, you can't go in expecting a sweep. The talent level of this team, though, the Phillies will be favored in every single one of those games. Advantage Phillies. Then they fly out to Arizona to face the Arizona Diamondbacks. Yeah, the Phillies should be favored in all of those games. Now, after that, it's a West Coast trip that they're on with 3 in Arizona and then 3 in San Francisco with our good friend Gabe Kapler. A tougher team. Not anywhere near what the Mets are or the Braves are or the Astros are, the Dodgers. They're not. The Giants are not going to be a playoff team this year. Those are 3 games where there'll be more fights, but the Phillies are the better team there. The Miami Marlins come up next. 3 games against Miami. Very winnable series. Then 3 games against Washington, a AAA team. 3 more games against Miami. Winnable series. And then here's where it gets interesting. You got Atlanta, you got Toronto, you got Atlanta for a tough stretch in the middle of September. And that is going to be the pivotal stretch that says whether or not the Philadelphia Phillies make it in the playoffs. Remember this. September 16th to September 25th is the stretch where the Phillies will determine whether or not they'll make it in. 3 against Atlanta, 2 against Toronto, 4 more against the Braves. But then you round out your season with a long road trip. Yeah, 3 games in Chicago against the Cubs, 4 in Washington against the Nationals. So those should all be favored for Phillies wins. And then 3 against Houston, who could be resting guys because they could already be clinched. And thank you, Yankees, for collapsing in the American League to allow the Houston Astros to really go off. So the competition is significantly diminished at this point the rest of the season. That one stretch starting on September 16th is something focus worthy, but from now until then, and it is the 22nd of August. So from now until September 16th, the Phillies should be favored in like 90% of their games. So it sucks not beating the Mets. This is the really, really easy part of the schedule starting now. Bryce Harper potentially coming back in the next week or so. Yeah, this is the time to turn it on, and the Phillies are perfectly poised to do so. They're just going to have to shake off a couple bad performances from this weekend, and I believe they can do that. So I'm not writing off that Mets series. That sucked, and the team looked like they sucked, and the starting pitching looked like they sucked. And I was as upset about those games as you guys were, but now that that series is over, nothing you can do. And when you look at it, well, you just see one team that the Philadelphia Phillies have had trouble with, and it means, hey, they're better than 28 other teams in baseball, which they're not, but like they have the opportunity to be. And just because you can't beat that one team doesn't completely sink the Philadelphia Phillies in general. So that's how I feel about the series with the New York Mets. Coming up, we're going to preview the upcoming series with the Cincinnati Reds and talk through a little bit about what we just saw in Cincinnati prior to that Mets series, because the Phillies are playing the Reds for the second time in 3 series. We'll discuss that next on Locked On Phillies. Let me tell you all about BetOnline, because betonline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information. From live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts, they have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. All right, let's preview the Phillies' upcoming series with the Cincinnati Reds, because it's another great opportunity for the Philadelphia Phillies to win a series, to potentially sweep a 4-game series. Cincinnati coming here to Philadelphia, it's going to be even tougher for them than it was when the Phillies took 2 of 3 in the series in Cincinnati. So a great opportunity for the Phillies. Here's how they line up, because 2 of their best pitchers are throwing in the series as well. Actually, all 3 of their best pitchers, their top 3 pitchers, are all throwing in this series with the Reds. So starting off with tonight's game, 7:05 here in Philadelphia, Noah Syndergaard takes the mound, and he'll be facing off against Luis Cessa. Now, Cessa is a bullpen spot start guy. He's listed as a relief pitcher. He's not truly a starting pitcher. And he's another, stop me if you've heard this before, a young Cincinnati Reds pitcher who's got some opportunity, some talent, but not to the level of Noah Syndergaard, who is a bona fide MLB starter, even if I do think he's the 5th best starter in the rotation right now. Syndergaard, better than Cessa. So I'm telling you, advantage Phillies in that matchup. Then, well, you see Nick Lodolo again in Game 2, who absolutely dominated the Phillies in the series finale game in Cincinnati just a little bit under a week ago. But, hey, Nick Lodolo is facing Ranger Suarez, and Suarez has been the Phillies' best pitcher over the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe even a month, depending on how you look at some of Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler's recent starts. But Ranger Suarez over Nick Lodolo, yeah, he is the better pitcher, even though the Phillies offense will have to show up tomorrow night, and that's a big game. Then you have Aaron Nola taking the mound in Game 3, another 7:05 start. All of these 7:05 starts, no day baseball in this series, no Thursday day game. The business person specials are done. And he's facing Graham Ashcraft, who doesn't even have a picture on ESPN. He's got a good amount of games started this year. He's thrown 93 innings, given up 101 hits, 41 earned runs. So he's got a 3.97 ERA. So 24-year-old, he's batting lefty, but he throws right, which I don't understand why they have pitchers batting anymore on ESPN, considering the universal DH, but a righty. And that 3.97 ERA, well, yeah, that's something that you look at. Could this be another Nick Lodolo-esque game where it's a young pitcher the Phillies can't quite figure out that has some talent and they haven't seen him before, so we can ambush him? Who knows? You could talk yourself into Graham Ashcraft every way you want. Aaron Nola is the better pitcher, advantage Phillies. And then in Thursday night's game, Zach Wheeler takes the mound, and he needs a bounce back in the worst way. He's been bad in his last couple starts. He's facing Justin Dunn, who only has 2 results on the year as a starter. He is a 26-year-old righty, and he's not really giving them anything. 13 and a third innings pitched for the Reds so far this year, and a 6.08 ERA. 10 strikeouts on the year, a 1.73 whip. This is another guy that just the Phillies should absolutely dominate. Really, they should dominate 2 of the 4 starters in this series, and they should be able to beat Nick Lodolo and Ashcraft because you got Suarez and Nola going. So, advantage Phillies. 3 wins certainly on the table. A sweep, not off the table. A split would be upsetting, and it's time for the Phillies to turn it on. As much as I was, we'll call it laissez-faire about the loss to the Mets, whatever, like they're just one team and the Phillies have handled every other team good, and now that team's out of your way for the rest of the regular season. I am anxious for them to start ripping off a long win streak again, and they have a chance to do it against the Cincinnati Reds and then the Pirates after that, like the Diamondbacks after that. These are beatable teams, and it starts with this series with the Cincinnati Reds out there, or here at Citizens Bank Park. I keep forgetting they're home. I feel like they've been home for a long time, but really they haven't. That Mets series just felt nightmarishly long. And just taking a look at tonight's game as well as we zone in in this one to see what the chances are for the Phillies to pull it off. Well, we have a lineup for the Cincinnati Reds. We have a lineup for the Philadelphia Phillies as well. Or sorry, actually, the Phillies lineup is not out. So then we'll just tell you how the Reds line up. It's Noah Syndergaard versus Luis Cessa. 5.5 ERA for Cessa is 3.95 for Syndergaard. Minimal innings for Cessa. He's only thrown 37 2/3 innings. So Syndergaard has 98 innings pitched. It's just not totally comparable. Looking at the ERAs, Syndergaard's been the better pitcher. He's going to face a lineup that is Fraley in right field, who we know has the home run power. We've seen it. Jonathan India, Farmer, Mike Moustakas playing first base, batting cleanup, Solano DHing, Senzel playing center field, Friedel playing left, Barrero, who you remember hit the walk-off in the last game of the series before in Cincinnati, will be playing shortstop, and Austin Romine will catch. Now let's see if we've got any stats against Noah Syndergaard. Fraley, it was 1 for 4 against him in his only 4 plate appearances. Farmer, 2 for 3, 667. Moustakas, 1 for 6 career, been around a little bit longer than these other guys, 167. Solano, 1 for 3. Barrero, 0 for 3. Now, it's minimal, and then Jonathan India, Senzel, Friedel, Romine, all have never faced him. They haven't really seen Syndergaard either. So if you're going to talk about the excuse of, well, Luis Cessa, who knows who he is? The Phillies haven't seen him. He hasn't thrown that many innings. He's only thrown 37 2/3 innings this year. Well, none of the Reds have really seen Noah Syndergaard either. And they're scouting out there because he's been in the league a long time. But you can see pitches on film. Stuff looks different when you're in the box. Hopefully Thor continues to improve because he's been steadily getting better in his start since becoming a Philadelphia Philly. And also, hopefully he stands up to the criticism because a lot of people have been saying, oh, Noah Syndergaard, he pushed back this start because he was ducking the Mets. He didn't want to throw against his former team. He didn't need the extra rest. Now he's been going on long rest all year. So is it a coincidence that he's missed multiple starts against the Mets this year by needing an extra day of rest? I don't know. It could be that he doesn't want to face his former team and doesn't want to face that juggernaut lineup and would rather face an easier opponent. It's still in the coincidence zone for me. I'm not fully sure that he's actually doing this intentionally to miss the Mets. I think it's just taking care of the elbow, and it happens to be against New York and kind of seems like he's ducking them, but I'm not willing to say that yet. And the Phillies don't see the Mets for the rest of the year. So, hey, we're not going to get a chance to know whether or not that was the case. But I don't think that is the case. I think he's steadily been improving. The extra day of rest should mean he's good to go for tonight and good to go deep into tonight's game. And the starting pitchers, a lot more pressure is on them now with Sir Anthony Dominguez down and Corey Knebel down for the year. So take care of business. That's the bottom line. This is a winnable game tonight, a winnable series against the Reds, and a sweepable series against the Reds. So if I'm the Phillies, I'm taking a little bit of ire from that Mets series, and I'm running it up on the Cincinnati Reds. But I'm not the Phillies. They are. We'll have to see how they perform tonight, and we'll have the reaction to that on tomorrow's episode. Everything going on there. That's all I've got for regular segments. But coming up, we've got to do off the poll. Didn't get one out this weekend because we had the Mets series 4 games, the doubleheader Saturday. So I was doing some bonus stuff for you guys. But off the poll, if you're not familiar with, we're going to ask you a poll question and post it on Twitter, post it on my Twitter account, and then react to it when you respond and give us the results. So coming up next, I'll tell you what our poll question is for today as we wrap up today's Locked On Phillies. All right, so we've done this one before. This is a poll question that we've kind of asked, and I'm interested to update this considering the Mets series. Because before the Mets series, not this most recent one, but 2 ago, the games up in New York, where it was the win with Ranger Suarez on the mound, the loss with Zach Wheeler on the mound, and then the loss in the series finale where they got absolutely shelled. It's not that series, but that was the one that we asked, remember, and off the poll. Will this series affect whether or not you're in or out on the Philadelphia Phillies? And the majority of people, I think it was like 70% of responders said, no, it's just one series. That means there were about 20-some, almost 30% of people who responded to that were basing whether or not they're in or out on the Phillies by that series. So I'm going to ask you now that this second Mets series is done, and it was a disappointment, and the Phillies did show up small here at Citizens Bank Park and didn't get a lot of fan base support. A lot of Mets fans came down, and hey, listen, you can't control who buys the tickets, but you can control how many of your fans are interested in going, and the Phillies are still having trouble drawing fans to the ballpark. So I want to know, after this Philadelphia Phillies series where they lost 3 of 4 to the New York Mets, are you still in on the Phillies, or did that series make you out on the Phillies? So after this series with the New York Mets, where the Mets took 3 games of 4, are you still in on the Philadelphia Phillies, or are you out? Simple enough. It'll be posted on at @LO_Phillies on Twitter. It'll be posted at Connor Thomas 975 on Twitter. Check out both those accounts, my personal and the show's main account at @LO_Phillies. And we'll find out how you guys feel. And I'll respond to that in the the final segment of tomorrow's episode, and just get a feel of the fan base, because I don't want you guys to be out. This is still a good baseball team. They just have trouble with one team, and they don't have to play that team anymore this year until potentially in the postseason, and that would be a second round matchup unless somehow the Braves track down the Mets for the division. So, yeah, let me know if you're still in or still out by voting on that poll, and we will discuss tomorrow's episode. That's all the time I've got for you today. I want to thank you one more time for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sully, he's covering the league like no one else can. He's got the historical knowledge, the humor, everything Sully's known for. If you've checked out his work before, if not, go check it out. It's a very entertaining listen covering all of the big news around baseball. It's Locked On MLB, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I want to thank you all for rating, reviewing, subscribing, following along on social media. Continue to do that. If you haven't rated, reviewed, subscribed, and done all that good stuff that helps us grow Locked On Phillies, what are you waiting for? Help us out. Help yourself out by helping us improve the show. Let us know what you do like, don't like, all this good stuff, and help us continue to progress this forward so we can enjoy the stretch run by the Phillies together even more. That's all my time, though, and I will talk to you all on tomorrow's episode, the next episode of Locked On Phillies.